Hello, welcome to the Doomer Optimism podcast. This is going Godward for Doomer Optimism. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with who I know as a Twitter egirl, Audrey Horne. I was thinking to myself, if I could describe, who Audrey is or what she does, I just think Audrey is this beautiful socialite who's living this glamorous life that we just all kind of like live vicariously through. But Audrey is a very thoughtful person, and she has kind of entered into the Doomer Optimism world. She was a frequent, or not a frequent, but a recent attendee at the Wagon Box in Wyoming, where we had a little conference of sorts, some speakers, some interesting thinkers. So I wanted to bring Audrey on as kind of a e-girl Doomer Optimism crossover. We're going to just attempt this and see how it goes. But Audrey has some really interesting thoughts regarding women, and that's, if you follow me on Twitter as well, that's kind of X. I know people don't want to call it Twitter anymore. So X, if you follow me there, I'm super interested in women's issues, and Audrey is as well. So Audrey, I'm going to give you a minute to just introduce yourself, tell us about your background, tell us if you are actually a glamorous socialite, and yeah, just let us know what you're up to.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I would love to be a full-time socialite, and I'm glad that that's how I come across, but I do have a day job. I'm a statistician by day and spend as much of my free time as possible socializing, I guess, here in DC and New York, which has been enabled almost entirely through Twitter, which I'm very, very thankful for. But I'm very extroverted, so if you get the impression that I'm out and about, then it's true. It's just because I need to be around people all the time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, that's all.
I was going to say, do you feel like, I know as an extra, like from one extrovert to another, do you feel that Twitter or X gives you kind of an outlet for socialization when you are kind of depleted in real life?
Yes, yeah, which is maybe unhealthy because it's in such a controlled way. But I don't know, for someone with my disposition, the constant influx of information really is addicting. And I don't know, I feel like I've tried to harness it in a productive way and have seen some payoffs. Like I've met so many interesting people through it. Yeah, but yeah, it does kind of uh, scratch that itch. I do have real life friends and I do go out and hang out with them in person, but I think my threshold for socialization is so high. Twitter just like do a lot of that for me.
Yeah, I get it. I remember a while back, it's been a few years ago, learning about long range connections and short range connections. And so a short range connection would be, like someone I know in real life, someone that I know from church or in my friend group or that kind of thing. But a long range connection is like what you and I are doing. So, we're in totally different states, we're hundreds of miles apart, but we're able to have this connection through a social media site, through Twitter, through X. And what I'm seeing a lot of, and maybe you're seeing this too, and you can speak to it, these long range connections that people have now through the internet, people find their communities, and then they take those long range connections and they turn them into short range connections where they start to kind of build communities in real life, um, because they found each other on the internet. And that's kind of what I think Doomer Optimism is doing, is they're trying to take those long range connections, turn them into real life short range connections. So kind of harnessing all the goodness that comes from that on the internet, and then translating that into real life. And so what Ashley and Jason have done, I'm going to get into this, is host these conferences. The one that you most recently attended at the Wagon Box, where all these people have come together through long range connections, and they come to this place and they talk about their visions and their goals and things like that. So tell me about your experience at the Wagon Box, what you thought it was going to be like, what it was actually like, anything that you took away from it, things that you wish had been there that wasn't there, just your overall experience.
Yeah, I mean, I had a great time. I think I totally get that. Like you find your like-minded friends, you find people that you would normally never meet in real life online, and then the hope is that you bridge that gap into real life, and hang out with them there. And I've had that happen a lot. So I was very open to the idea of going and meeting a bunch of my mutuals who I knew would be there. I was invited by our mutual friend James, and it was right after I had gone through a breakup. I was like, I need an adventure. Came at the perfect time. Went back to Wyoming, brought a friend with me from here in DC. She was also open and going at the last minute. We didn't know what to expect, and we were so delightfully surprised. It was just like a really interesting mix of people from totally different backgrounds, very different worldviews, kind of united over a optimistic sense of I was like branding it before I went there because I didn't really know. And I was going in blind. I was like, I think it's like a return thing, but it's not overtly like that because I know there's like artists going and tech people going. So I was, but there was this sort of return to the earth, agrarian energy surrounding it. And there was some of that, but it was much more optimistic than I think the narratives that I've seen online. Just focused on like what can we do to make a better future, rather than totally focused on returning to the past, which I thought was very refreshing and not what I expected. And yeah, I love to meet my mutuals there too. I met Katura and Andy and a lot of other people that I've been following for years. So that was a really wonderful opportunity in beautiful
Yeah.
Wyoming.
Yeah, I'm dying to go to one. So I didn't get to go to the one in Wyoming. I didn't get to go to the one in New York. So I'm really hoping that the next one at the Wagon Box I get to go to because it'd be
Yes.
great. Maybe you will come again to that. So I think that something that's big in the Doomer optimism world is their association with Paul Kingsnorth, who wrote The Cross and the Machine, and a lot of machine talk. I'm not sure if that was part of the dialogue or the discourse at the Wagon Box when you were there.
Like a sort like what
Like the concept of the machine. I don't know if that term was brought up.
it was brought up, but it was never really defined, and I took it to assume, maybe you can correct me, um, just sort of industrialization and like AI stuff, like the spread of and the advancement of technology that alienates us from each other rather than brings us together. I do remember somebody said something that really struck me. It wasn't like anti-tech. That wasn't necessarily the thrust of everything. It's just anti-tech that alienates us,
Mm.
which I is certainly something I can get behind.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That it's not we're not completely becoming Luddites. We're not removing all of technology from our lives, but we're saying let's be cautious about what alienates us from one another, what alienates us from nature, and kind of take what we can that's good and be cautious about the things that might cause greater disconnection that we
Yes.
more than we already feel. Um, so and I appreciate there is that and I'm sure you've seen it on the internet. I'm sure you've seen it on Twitter. I keep saying the internet, but Twitter X. There is that whole group of people that are kind of like return. They want to just completely like go back to pre-modernity. Let's just get rid of everything post-modernity ruined our lives and it made our lives worse or made our souls worse, whatever. And I just don't think that you can really ever return. And so I like the idea of there are some things about modernity, there are some things about technology and industrialization that have been bad for human flourishing. But we're not going to throw everything out. We're not ever going to fully return. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I totally picked up on that, and I found that very refreshing. As I said, there's uh, a strain of that that's so disconnected with reality. What I appreciated about the wagon box is we heard from a lot of people who really are out there, on the farm farming, know exactly what the like how hard it is and what it takes to have us grow a successful cattle ranch, or like they're
Mhm,
really in it. um
mhm.
and they certainly weren't tossing everything out. It's just this sort of like, how do we make it better? How do we not lose touch, like you said, with um, the earth, with each other, and by extension, it wasn't overtly spiritual, but I took it this way, like with God.
Mm, Yeah.
And that's something that I found very, very compelling. And I
Mhm.
think it attracts people from, all sides of the political spectrum. It's not just, as you might see portrayed in popular media with the tradwife phenomenon, which is a very right coded. I felt that this was a more welcoming space for people
Mhm.
from, all different backgrounds. I think we saw that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been my experience as well. Again, I've not been to any of the conferences or events, but just being in that space, having friends in that space, I that's the vibe I get. I don't feel like I'm kind of pigeonholed in terms of, any sort of ideology or political view or there's like you're saying, it's kind of a mix of all sorts of views and it's kind of like it's like you could live off the grid and be completely like removed from everything, or you can be, a person in tech
Yes.
who is just looking to like reconnect and with nature in some way.
Yeah,
Um,
or like me, like I, am not at all. I've never considered myself to be like anti-tech or I'm very thankful for like X, for Twitter,
mhm,
for opening up my world. So I consider myself very pro-tech. I work in tech essentially. But there's still this aspect of me that yearns, I want to overcome that. And I certainly sense that among everybody else.
yeah. So I want to backtrack just a little bit and just go back to the machine, the concept of the machine. And this is where I kind of want to get into like egirl content. This is where the Doomer optimism and egirl crossover hopefully will happen. I hope it works out. I hope that's what people pick up on this episode. So the way that I understand the machine is that it's kind of like this it's the material and immaterial consequences of industrialization, technology, and modernity, and like you said, in a way that actually impedes human flourishing rather than encourages it. I think if I was just going to like make a little blurb what I think that the machine is. So it's kind of this invisible thing, a material and immaterial thing. I mean, I think people would say like bureaucracy is part of the machine, but also it's this invisible acedia. I think that part of us, this restless part of us, that doesn't rise to our potential. So what I want to get into is how the machine affects women, particularly when it comes to like beauty and aging. And I wonder if you have found yourself kind of taken captive by the impulse to put a filter on a picture, to use Facetune. I mean, I certainly have that impulse. Like, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
my crow's feet really look so out of that picture. Like I want to just go, I want to go on Facetune. I want to just like, oh, a little bit. I just wonder, if you have thought
Yeah.
about or could say something about how the machine manipulates women and kind of makes them, maybe more insecure, uh,
Yeah.
makes them kind of slaves to um,
Yeah.
unrealistic beauty standards, that kind of thing.
Certainly, other people have said this better than me, but it's absolutely a concern. I turned 30 this year and I feel like the messaging around aging is it might just be because I'm the age, that has so much weight on it. Like turning 30 for a woman shouldn't be that way, but it is. Um, but I feel like it's gotten way worse. Like when I was younger, it wasn't even this bad. When I was a little girl growing up, the messaging wasn't this intense. I like don't like taking selfies. Like I avoid them for the most part, and I'm very, very nitpicky. And I feel like that has accelerated um, since I was, 13, 14, and Instagram and Facebook were just starting. I remember going through pictures then and like looking for the best one, and that's only gotten worse. I think one of the biggest issues, like in terms like where the machine intersects with that, and again, I know other people have gone into this at length, but the way that we're exposed to so many different images of beauty and
Mhm.
how that's almost become this there's this like it's a homogenous and like singular form of like a beautiful face. They call it Instagram face.
Mhm.
That's like the
Mhm.
acceptable beauty standard right now, and
Mhm.
there's less room
Okay.
for like different types of beauty or an aging beauty or I don't know. anything beyond that sort of surgical precise standard, I think I feel that pretty strongly in a way I don't think we see in like the 80s, the 90s, even the early 2000s. Like as stringent as those beauty standards were then, and you see a lot of people talk about like, oh, Victoria's Secret back in the day was, you know, had like a singular standard, but like even I really think it's gotten worse. I think it's much worse because we're so exposed.
Sorry, there's like a very loud
Airplane.
no, I totally agree with you. And I think that what you're saying, that like surgical precision standard of beauty for women, like a certain face, a certain nose, a certain, eyebrow, like there's this standardization almost in beauty now. And I think that's all part of like the monoculture. It's like, how really social media is, particularly I'm going to use Instagram, has kind of made us all the same in a
And
way.
TikTok. Yeah, TikTok is brutal. TikTok
Yes.
is genuinely like the algorithm is so insane. I really need to get off TikTok. It's way worse, I think, than Instagram was. I really do think it's cooking everyone's brains. Yeah, and it's just accelerated that sort of homogenous beauty standard that I think is really dangerous. So like when I look in the mirror, I see that I'm not that. And that's all I can think about. Or when I see a
Yes.
selfie and it's just not ever going to be the same.
Yes. And I think that, and you might agree with this, I think that women really have to be conscientious of what the machine is selling us, what we think that we have to be. Like I have to consciously talk myself through that insecurity that I feel when, like you're saying, when I see a face that my face doesn't look like that, my eyebrows don't look like that, my eyelashes, whatever, and maybe the men who are listening to this or watching this, they don't understand, but women really like hone in on those little details. And, I
Yeah, it'll
just,
make you crazy.
yeah.
Yeah. You really have to consciously reject it, I think, more not it's not like women in the past didn't deal. Like this has been a issue from the beginning of time, but it's just so aggressive now. You really have to make the conscious decision to
Yeah.
reject it and
And the
embrace it.
digitization of images. I mean, 50 years ago, there was not this digital technology where you had ubiquitous, images of women online. I mean, now there's billions, probably, images. So there wasn't this opportunity to sit and scroll and compare ourselves, like that was not available to women, 50 years ago.
No, no.
Not even really 20. I mean, when did Instagram come out? Like 2011, 2010, something like
Yeah,
that? Yeah,
2010.
yeah. So, you brought up being 30, and I didn't talk to you about this before we came on, but I'm thinking about it now, about this tweet that you had where you're like, "Some of you have not turned 30." What was the tweet exactly? Because I don't have it in front of me, but it just like
Oh,
occurred
like
to
you
me.
know how these girls talk about turning 30? It drives me
Yeah,
crazy. Like I notice
yeah.
it all the time. It's like again, I have to consciously reject this, but I can get so neurotic about it.
Mhm,
They really act like it's like the end. I'm like, you're gonna turn 30 and then what? How are you gonna
mhm,
talk about yourself then? You're really not prepared.
mhm. Yeah.
And I've always, even when I was younger, rejected that. I hated when women who were older than me talk negatively about their age because I'm like, you're setting the standard. You're giving
Mhm,
me nothing to look forward to.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
You have to aggressively, anyway, I don't mean to preach here, but yeah, like
No, I know, I feel the same way. I mean, but, I don't know, I don't wanna get all, like, I've been accused of being a feminist, I've been accused of many things, but and I don't wanna, try to go down that path, but, I mean, a lot of men, not all men, but there are men online who kind of perpetuate that same, like, "Well, you're 30, you're 35," that women have no
oh
value
yeah,
beyond a certain age. So not
yes.
only do you see it like in, on TikTok or Instagram, and there's filters and there's Botox and there's, all sorts of things to reverse aging or to make you look younger, and you hear it from women who talk negatively about aging, but then you also hear it from men as well. And I just
Oh,
think
for men,
women.
absolutely. No, I think it originates with men. I'm not afraid to say that because I've seen it from the very beginning, like from logging on, like the empty egg cartons in the replies. It's so cruel and so harsh, and it's always struck me as ineffective and bizarre because, of course, women understand aging more intimately than like any, like, you don't have to remind me that I'm aging. I know that I'm aging. Um, and it makes me sad when I see women contribute to that because it just accelerates, it makes it worse. Um, I don't really think it's necessary. Again, I don't think, like, I was just watching, I think I tweeted about it too, Practical Magic, and I always look up the ages of actresses now. And Nicole Kidman was like 32, and Sandra Bullock was 35, and I was like, oh my gosh, they look so good. I don't think there was this, again, like with we're seeing everybody, we're seeing so many images of people. I'm to blame in this because I'm so online, but I see so much messaging about aging, and it's really hard not to internalize. But people weren't exposed to that as aggressively in the past either. And so that's another very negative outcome.
Yeah. And just kind of the consequences of the machine, the consequences of modernity, industrialization, technology, all those things is kind of an increased or a hyperfixation on anti-aging, on
Yeah.
wanting to remain, eternally youthful, rather than women, thinking, I want to be the matriarch of a family someday. I want to have this legacy of wisdom and generosity and that kind of thing, rather than, women focusing on the eternal virtues that, women are kind of naturally, created to move toward, rather than that being the focus. Modernity, the machine, whatever you want to say, has kind of made women and men hyper fixate on youth.
Yeah, they don't allow you to evolve. It's like an anti-redemptive
Mhm.
narrative that I think is everywhere, and I really push against it. It is pure doomer to think like that. You are
Mhm.
not allowed to change. You are not allowed to grow. You're not allowed to make any mistakes. You're not allowed to be redeemed. You're not. There's no future. There's no linear progress. It is frozen. And I'm against that more than anything. Like, I really think it's so evil, and you have to actively reject it because it's a false narrative. Like, the rest of life doesn't function like that. Real life, when you're engaging with it, is not like that at all. People are responding to you as an active presence. You're like a living being in a soul and a body. Um, but it's so easy to get trapped into that narrative because of the way that we get atomized online. We create these little bubble worlds online, and the algorithm just feeds you the same thing over and over and over again. It's really, really toxic.
No, that's right. I think you're spot on in saying those things. So this kind of like is a good lead into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is, I mentioned this is kind of like the Doomer optimism, e-girl crossover, and I really appreciate what the average e-girl is attempting to do in the online public square. And I just want to ask you, I think people think maybe sometimes e-girl is like a derogatory term. I don't think it is. I don't know, maybe you feel differently. How do you feel about the term e-girl?
I'm fine with it. People are sometimes rude to me because I'm 30 now. They're like, "You're not an e-girl. Stop calling yourself an e-girl." I'm like, "I'm not married yet. Like, maybe I'll even be an e-girl when I'm married. I don't want to say, I'm not going to make any promises." I like the term e-girl. I think it's freeing. I think it's kind of funny and tongue in cheek. And also there's like a little mystique to it. Like, people are like, "Ooh," and like, I don't know. It was a very specific thing before, but it's evolved to encompass like any girl who posts online, which is like, I think, a little sexist, but there's still a touch of that original mystique to it.
Mhm.
Like, it's just like, oh my gosh, a girl who games, a girl who posts, how unique and different.
Yeah.
I think
No,
it's
I
fun.
know, I think you're absolutely right. And I think like I don't remember who said this or where I saw it or anything. I don't even know how to attribute this, but someone said something like a woman is forever 18 in her heart or something like that. Like every woman there, no matter how mature she becomes,
That's so
how
funny. Yeah.
wise she becomes, no matter what she transcends to or moves toward, there's a part of her that's always a girl, that's always like this 18-year-old girl. And so I feel like, and I'm not just saying this because I am older, I think that e-girl kind of transcends ages. It kind of goes across the lifespan. I don't think that you have to be unmarried in a certain age or under a certain age to be an e-girl. And I'm not just saying that because, you know,
No, I
I'm a
agree. I
woman
think it's a
online.
spirit.
But,
It's
I
like a
think
jovial, sort of playful spirit. I
yes,
think it's fun.
yes.
That's
Mhm.
so funny. My friend was just asking me, he's always asking people this at a party. It's a great party question. What's your normative age? And I said
Mm,
25. But I
Okay.
also feel like 9 and also 17. I feel that though. Like there's like something that I
It
carry
really
with
depends on
me.
where I am in my cycle. It's like, do it's like, I feel younger when I'm, in this part of my cycle. Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that the like you're saying, the playfulness, um, I don't think women should ever lose that part
I
of her
agree.
being, her nature. So being in the online public square, what do you think as a woman, as an e-girl, what are some of the benefits that you think girls, women bring to the online public sphere? What have you benefited? How have you benefited? I know you've made these, friendships and stuff, but like what's the good thing about women being in the online public sphere?
I mean, being in the online. I mean, I don't think this is entirely um, the domain of women, but I do think women can bring this sort of joyful, irreverent spirit to posting. And there's like female privilege, you know. I remember in church, whenever we had you'd have group testimony and somebody would stand up and speak, and whenever a female voice, like a woman, a young woman's voice specifically, you could see like people turning their heads to hear it. So there's like some privilege in being a woman speaking online. You get more eyes on you and that type of thing. And that is fleeting, you know, it's not going to last forever.
Mhm.
But there's something to that voice. I don't really know. I'm trying to think what is special about it. Just there's so many different types of voice of like female voices online. I don't know that like e-girl is like an entire
Yeah.
category.
Yeah. I was thinking like I feel like sometimes people I don't want to put all men in a category, but it's, there's this sometimes women, and women do this to men, like that women are a monolith, like we're all the same, that kind of thing. But I think women being online and the way that, women have different interests, they have different ways of speaking online, really showcases like how different, women are in their feminine expression.
Yes. Yeah, I think just having women online is a great way to show that difference. There's a gentler spirit, I think, that you cultivate
Mhm.
when you allow that. Just like in
Yeah.
any space, you know, not to be like overly sexist here, but like you know, women civilize men. When you let women into a space, men act a little better, I think, in terms of, I mean, generally speaking, and I think the same applies to online.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I do think that women bring some moderation to male discourse. Men can often be, a little cruder, a little more vulgar. I don't want to say that all men are like that because they certainly aren't.
No, and I can be a little,
There are
yeah.
men who are listening to this who are wonderful men, men who have been on this podcast, wonderful men. I'm not saying that all men.
No, women can be crude too. I mean, it's not,
Women can, yes,
but yeah,
they
there's,
can.
generally speaking, I think there is something, yeah, there is a different tenor to the voice
Yes.
of women online, especially in the spaces that we inhabit. So it's,
Mhm.
I think, a net good,
Yeah.
um, in any case to have female voices, like in any room. I do think it's good. It's a gentler
Yeah.
and or more joyful spirit.
What has been a negative for you being a woman online? I mean, I know I can think of a few off the top
Gosh,
of my head, like for me, that's been
I,
terrible. Yeah.
I've gotten in so many fights online and I really regret most of them. Um, People are really mean to women online. I've had people DM me horrible things. I've had stalkers. Really, there's a lot of downsides to being online um, that I really still don't think outweigh the benefits, especially for, you know, my own trajectory. I was very alone and I needed and really craved to be known and understood. And I didn't have that in my life. And online really opened a lot of doors for me and
Mhm.
brought me a lot of wonderful, wonderful friends and like deep, intimate friendships. But the process of getting to that point was really painful and involved a lot of harassment and unnecessary fighting.
Yeah.
Online discourse, as everybody who's like on Twitter X knows, enables a lot of anger and you know, enables provocation for provocation's sake, which is very tempting. It can be a really addictive cycle. there's a lot of pitfalls to being online. I think you have to be really careful and honest with yourself if you're going to like stay logged on. It's
Yeah.
not easy to do.
Yeah. I think for me, like, as a woman, if you want to say something that you know is going to be controversial, or it's going to be picked on, it's going to be picked up by misogynists, whatever,
Yeah.
you really do have to say to yourself, as a woman, is this going to be worth the hate
Yeah.
that I'm going to get? Is it
Yeah,
is it
and
so
the
important to
cruelest
me
of
to
the
say
cruel
that?
possible thing too. Like
Yes,
they will
yes.
be, there's like no bottom. So yeah,
There is
I
no
had to
bottom.
learn that the hard way. Like you now I try not to engage in anything that I know will blow up
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah.
Especially as a woman. Like there are actual like stalkers online that will, find out information about you, and it's really scary. You have to be very, very careful.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. And I think as a woman, you probably will agree, and it's just saying what you're saying, or I'm agreeing with you. I don't think that maybe the other sex understands what it's like to have something that you feel is really important to say,
Hmm.
and you have to weigh, will I be okay being abused online by the opposite sex if I say this thing? I think men tend to, and again, I'm not saying all men, but I
Right.
a lot of the online men, I think they wanna fight. That's like
They want to fight, they want to hurt women. They really do because they feel insecure, they feel resentful. And I understand like it's not a great climate. I have poked the bear more times than I care to count in terms of like poking specifically the misogynistic right-wing bear. They're very nasty and you have to know what you're dealing with.
Mhm.
Men don't have that same sort of vulnerability, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that I do. I'm not a man, and maybe a man will come on and say, "No, it's actually exactly like that for men too." But as a woman, there is just a degree of caution that you have to take whenever you're going to post something that you know is going to be controversial. And there have been many things that I've not said simply because I don't want to be attacked. I don't want it to be picked up by someone who is going. I mean, early on, I didn't understand the rules of engagement really on Twitter, and I posted something about just wanting a milk cow or something like that, or wanting 5 more kids. I don't know what I said, and I think I said it as a 39-year-old. I'm older now, but I mean, all these people picked it up and turned it
Oh,
into this horrible, kind of like the empty egg carton. Well, you know,
so evil.
yeah, and it just that was my first introduction to, oh, this is what it's going to be like if you say anything that's, almost pro woman, or
Yeah.
um, critical of a certain sect of men or whatever. Um,
Yeah, and
so
then you have to
yeah,
make all these qualifications beforehand, and even that won't
yes,
work. Really, you can't, they're not going to be pleased. And I've
yeah,
really come full circle on that. Like, I just don't engage anymore in that type of discourse.
yeah.
It attracts the worst of the worst.
Yeah, and I don't know that the men who are very online, I don't know if they have to have that same thought when they're gonna post something controversial. I feel like when they post something controversial, it's like, "Oh boy, here we go. We're gonna get in a
I
fight
mean,
today,"
I do,
is
I
that
feel that too. I kind of like the fighting. That's the
oh,
problem.
see,
I
I'm just like,
really like crave it, or I
"Oh,
did.
man, no, I just can't." I'm just like, "I don't wanna fight with you all." Just like, I just wanna say my little thing, and if you don't like it, just keep scrolling, but,
I feel
I
that way more now. I've leveled out, but yes, there is a part of me that really enjoys the. And yeah, I wish I was like a little bit more free to just get in there,
mm,
but yeah, it's just
I hear
not
you.
worth
So I wanted to switch gears, real quick, to something you post on your Substack, or two different things. And actually, whenever we post the show, you'll have your Substack will be linked in the show, and
it.
your Twitter handle. Um, One about faith. I think the title of it was something about exorcism. I can't remember
Yes.
the exact title. Yes. But there was one line in the piece, and I think you're actually quoting someone, I think, to be exercised is feminine.
Yes, my friend said that to me. I just watched The Exorcist 3 for
Mhm.
Halloween,
Mhm.
and I thought it was a really, not a great movie, but a literary movie. And I wrote to my friend who's an author, um, and I'm sure he won't mind he's Gabriel Smith, the author of Brat. He's like a really
Mhm.
thoughtful writer in person. And I was like, I think you'd like this. And
Mhm.
he was like, no, I don't like exorcisms have a sort of feminine quality, right?
Mm.
Um, and I thought that was really interesting, and I could see what he meant by that. And it wasn't a derogatory thing at all. It was just sort of like a quality. And I was thinking about it. I was like, no, that's not right at all. Um, because an exorcism is good. You're removing evil from something.
Mm.
How can that be gendered? But as I was thinking about it more, it was like, no, um, there's something essentially feminine, I think, about faith, which is what an exorcism requires, and something essentially feminine about submission, which is what faith requires.
Mhm.
Uh, there is in Christianity, the church is seen as the bride of Christ, and Christ is, God is the Father. Like we're always submitting to God, and that is a condition that applies to everyone, male or female. Um, and I guess it's a kind of inherently gendered in that sense, but
Mhm.
not negative, not bad. And I was kind of coming to
Yeah.
terms with that in that piece, or just trying to like explore that concept.
Yeah, I found the line where you talked about faith. I've got it written down here about faith being feminine because all faith requires submission. That faith is innately feminine because of the submissive piece. And or we think that submission. We think of submission and femininity as being synonymous. Like if you're a female, like your natural response should be submission. I just thought that was super interesting. And, you know, I've talked about this before. Just what is your religious background? I mean, you grew up in church, obviously.
Yes, I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian sect that met in homes.
Okay.
That was very odd. I've realized that now. I left about a year and a half ago due to widespread sex abuse scandals, and I'm currently looking for a new church. I still have a strong personal faith, but I found it hard to find a new church home because we were very conservative. We met in homes. We were very austere. It's kind of bare
Hmm.
bones hippie Christianity, not part of any major denominational tradition.
Hmm. Was it? I mean, would you describe it as cultish or no? Because I
Yes, I
know, like,
would now. I would
you
now. I
would.
was born 4 generations deep into it on each side. There wasn't like a central figure, but it was like marketed to us. Or I was afraid to leave for my whole, like I would never have left if this wouldn't have happened because we said we were the only right way to God. Like that was the right way to worship. So in that aspect, it was very cultish.
Yeah. Yeah, I've talked about this. I feel like there's a lot of negative things written and spoken about women and kind of like the inferiority of females or femininity. And I just always think, well, the bride, like the expression of Jesus church on earth, Christ church on earth is feminine. It is a bride. And so, how can you hate, female expression or feminine expression or femininity when,
Yes.
Christ's very
Yes, you have
reason.
to embrace it. There's no room, I think, for this whole concept of like muscular Christianity or, all this stuff I see online about how the church is alienating men. I think certainly that's true in many respects, but there is like you have to the culture of something can be feminine and that can be maybe bad for men, but the sincere core truth of Christianity requires an acceptance of those feminine qualities. And I think that's really good. I think what somebody commented, or maybe you did, I can't remember that. I think it was Katura,
Mm,
that women kind of show men what it's like to submit.
mm,
The first people who found Christ after the resurrection were women. There's an essential role of women in the relationship between Christ and women.
mhm,
And
mhm.
I don't think we should forget, and I think is it takes humility, I think, for men to, I'm not saying that we're above men in this aspect, but there's a model there that I think is I don't know, interesting to explore. I don't have
Yeah.
fully formed
No,
thoughts.
no, I think that's great. I love those thoughts. Um, the reason I even bring up, God or whatever transcendence is because I think that is part of the whole doomer optimism thing. I think a lot of people who have kind of been in this negative, pessimistic, everything's terrible. Well, even Paul Kingsnorth, I mean, found, you know, redemption or peace or connection to nature as he moved toward God. And I think a lot of people who have been in this pessimistic space, you know, everything's terrible, are starting to move toward the transcendent. Like they're seeing the transcendent as having some role to play in human flourishing.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I think we're really, somebody today told me that he thinks we're in the third great awakening or like spiritual
Mhm,
revival.
mhm,
And I definitely see signs of that. I think people are hungry for spiritual truth, for hungry for the transcendent, hungry for the sublime. And I think people have always been hungry for that, but for some reason things are cracking open right now in a way that I think we haven't seen in a very long time. I think there's many reasons to be optimistic about the future
I
right
feel the
now.
same way. No, I totally feel the same way. And I think, in some ways, especially in the last 50, 100 years, as industrialization has kind of taken over, I do think there has been, I mean, I don't know, maybe a spiritual dark ages. I think industrialization and technology have distracted us from, true intimacy, true human connection, connection with nature. I think it has made us, kind of spiritually blind, darkened us. But I think people are kind of starting to move out of that now and are moving toward, a reconnection with the transcendent, with God, with the divine. I mean, I know those are all kind of synonymous terms. As like, oh, wait a second, technology, industrialization, they've actually removed us from God, but we want to be moving toward him, you know, kind of that's the doomer optimism thing is like, okay, how can we keep what's good, remove what's bad to reconnect with each other, reconnect with God, reconnect with the earth. I don't know, everybody in the doomer optimism sphere is not necessarily a theist or whatever, but
Mhm.
theist, is that the right word?
Yeah,
Yeah. Um,
yes,
but definitely like an awareness that there's something outside of ourselves. Um,
yes.
okay, so we kind of talked about women. That was kind of like the majority of our talk, and just kind of how the machine affects femininity. So I want to kind of wrap things up with our kind of classic ending, which is your doomer take and your optimist take. So regarding women, the machine, femininity, what's your doomer take?
My doomer take is that women need men, and men are not always good to women. Men are unreliable and human, flawed beings, and it's hard sometimes to acknowledge that women need men, that we have to
Mm.
rely on them. I think there's a lot of resistance to that right now.
So you're saying that your doomer take is that
Women
don't
need men, will
women
always
need
need
men, and they
men.
don't want to acknowledge their need for men, and they I don't know, maybe that's not what you're saying. They don't want to acknowledge
No,
their need.
I think men are human and flawed and not a great. I mean, women will always need men. I think that will always kind of be a doomer thing. We are always relying on each other.
You
And
think
I think that the flip side of the coin, the optimism thing, is that men need women, like we need each other.
mm,
And uh, I think that's
that's really
really hard. And
interesting.
I think we've been focusing on how hard that's been, but I think it can also be really beautiful. And I'm optimistic that we can kind of create a better model or maybe
Mhm.
return to a better model. I don't know, create a healthier model for the
Yeah,
relationship
that's
between
super
women.
interesting. I wanna, like, think on that some more because it's like your doomer and optimist take is that we need each other, and also we need each other. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, "Oh, we need each other," but, "Oh, we need each other." That's super interesting. Like, I really wanna think about that. That actually reminds me of a book that I just recently picked up, like, literally 10 hours ago. And it's Christine de Pizan's The Book of the City of Ladies, which is really, really amazing. And I feel like I need to write like a whole long essay in response to it. But um, kind of our we kind of repress our nature whenever we
Yeah.
say we don't need each other. Like
Yes.
we actually do. And she
Yes. Yeah.
talks about that. And so I think that point you just made is super interesting. And I feel like I need to like think on it for like several minutes because I think that it has like a lot of depth.
My
Yeah.
friend Magdalene Taylor wrote a really good recent piece, part of a 3 series on her Substack about how men hate women, women hate men, and ultimately how we're afraid to admit that we need each other right now. And
Mhm.
but I think that's like a generalization. I do see that in society right now, but I'm optimistic that we can I always say, I kind of wish we could return to a naive model and just be like men and women discovering each other for the first
Yeah.
time. I love like a lot of radical feminist points. I agree with a lot of them, but I can't fully like embrace it um, because it entails rejecting men. Where when I think like if we could really meet each other, I'm an optimistic. Maybe I'm naive in that, or I'm an optimist, and maybe I'm naive in that. I think that if we could just meet each other where we are and with like full empathy and be naive to each other and be excited about discovering each other again, I think that would be wonderful, and I think it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. I really appreciate you coming on here. This was such like I'm just happy to like meet you through a screen. I've only known you like through Twitter, so to get to
Oh,
talk
likewise. This was
how to meet you
wonderful.
semi face to face. This is so nice. So tell everybody where they can find you on X, Twitter, and where they can find you on Substack.
I am Twitter's Audrey Horne. My at is credenza clear too. And my Substack is also Twitter's Audrey Horne. And one day, maybe soon, I might self-dox. But for now, that's what I write under. So you
Yeah,
can find
I
me
know.
there.
I'm so on the fence about self-doxing. I feel like it's going to come in the next like 6 months or so, but I'm
Oh,
just not quite.
it's scary.
I know it is scary. It feels so vulnerable to like
You know.
say who you actually are. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, Thank you, Audrey.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you so much, going.
yeah, and thank you for everyone who's watching this. All of Audrey's stuff will be in the notes whenever it's published, and we'll get it on Twitter also. We'll just circulate it around. It'll be on YouTube. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey,
Bye.
see ya.